I pulled into the parking garage downtown at 11:47, 3 minutes before my noon appointment with the Henderson Group. Coffee first, then contracts. The usual Tuesday routine that kept my commercial real estate portfolio humming at $20 million annually. You know how it is in this business? Timing is everything. Miss a deadline by 5 minutes, lose a deal worth millions, show up unprepared to a negotiation, watch some smooth-talking competitor walk away with your commission. I'd built my career on being exactly where I needed to be, exactly when I needed to be there, with exactly the right information to close the deal. Funny how life has a way of teaching you that some information finds you whether you're looking for it or not. The cafe on 5th Street buzzed with the lunch crowd, suits checking phones, lawyers shuffling papers, investment advisors calculating other people's money while sipping overpriced lattes. The kind of controlled chaos that makes downtown work, where everyone's too busy managing their own crises to pay attention to yours. I ordered my usual black coffee and grabbed a corner table where I could spread out the Henderson acquisition files. 20-story office building, prime location, seller motivated by divorce proceedings. Ironic, considering what was about to unfold. Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor about these things. That's when she approached, professional, mid-40s. The kind of woman who commands boardrooms without raising her voice and probably has a portfolio that makes grown men weep with envy. She wore a navy blazer that cost more than my truck payment, and her eyes had that sharp focus you see in people who've learned to read balance sheets for lies, and more importantly, learned to spot the liars writing them. "Austin Brooks?" she asked, already extending her hand like we were old business associates. I looked up from my documents, automatically shifting into networking mode. In commercial real estate, you never know when a casual encounter might turn into $1 million referral. "Do we know each other?" Rachel Hart, investment advisor with Pinnacle Financial. She sat down before I could respond, which was either incredibly bold or incredibly rude. In my experience, people who skip social niceties usually have something urgent to discuss. I believe we have a mutual interest that requires immediate attention. Bold move. In commercial real estate, you learn to read people fast. Hesitation costs money, and uncertainty kills deals. This woman wasn't selling anything, and she wasn't buying either. She had that particular stillness that comes right before delivering the kind of news that changes everything. "I'm listening," I said, closing the Henderson file. Whatever she was selling, it had just become more interesting than office buildings. Rachel placed her phone on the table between us with the deliberate precision of someone laying down evidence. In a courtroom. The screen showed a photo that made my coffee taste like ash, and my morning suddenly feel like the calm before a very expensive storm. My wife Melissa walking hand in hand with a man I didn't recognize. Not just walking, the body language spoke volumes about comfort, familiarity, the kind of easy intimacy that develops over time. Same photo, different angle, same two people entering the Marriott downtown, him holding the door like a gentleman. Same two people at Romano's Steakhouse last Thursday, the night Melissa said she was working late on the quarterly communications review for her agency. I stared at the images for exactly 10 seconds. Not because I needed time to process, I'd built a career on reading evidence fast and making decisions faster. I stared because I was calculating, timestamps, locations, the mathematics of betrayal, and how it compared to the mathematics of a 20-year marriage that I'd thought was built on solid foundations. Turns out some foundations have cracks you don't notice until someone shows you the structural damage. "Your husband?" I asked, already knowing the answer, but needing confirmation for what was clearly going to be a very important business discussion. "Jason Hart, corporate training consultant, specializes in leadership development seminars and team-building retreats." Her voice carried the same professional detachment she'd probably used to explain why someone's retirement portfolio was underperforming. "He's been conducting a lot of private sessions lately, very hands-on approach to professional development." The irony wasn't lost on me. Jason Hart, leadership consultant, apparently leading my wife through some very personal development exercises. And here I was, thinking her increased interest in professional networking events was just career ambition. I scrolled through more photos on her phone. Melissa in her red dress, the one she bought for client dinners. Jason in his gray suit, baseball cap pulled low like he was trying to be invisible. The kind of careful anonymity that takes planning, coordination, the sort of operational security you'd expect from people who understand that exposure equals consequences. "How long have you known?" I asked. 8 weeks, started when his travel expenses stopped matching his calendar. Rachel's smile had all the warmth of a quarterly earnings report. "I handle investments, Mr. Brooks. I notice patterns in financial data, and I definitely notice when someone's spending my money on activities that aren't generating returns for our household." She paused, studying my face with the same intensity she probably used to evaluate stock portfolios. "Your wife handles corporate communications, correct? She's been very thorough about documenting their collaboration, professional correspondence, strategic planning sessions, after-hours consultations. Quite the comprehensive communication strategy they've developed." Rachel slid a manila envelope across the table like she was presenting a quarterly report to disappointed shareholders. Inside, printed emails, restaurant receipts, hotel reservations, a paper trail that would make my real estate attorney proud of the documentation quality and simultaneously horrified by what it documented. "This is comprehensive," I said, flipping through evidence that represented weeks of careful investigation. "Most people would take this straight to a lawyer. Most people aren't married to professional manipulators who've turned deception into an art form." Rachel's smile had edges sharp enough to cut through corporate quarterly projections. "Jason talks his way out of everything. Charm, deflection, strategic apologizing. He's made a career of it. Leadership development, they call it. Really, it's just advanced manipulation techniques with PowerPoint presentations and team-building exercises." She leaned forward, and I recognized the posture. It was the same lean I used when explaining to clients why their property values were about to tank due to market conditions they hadn't seen coming. "He can't charm his way out of evidence if there's nowhere to pivot. That's where you come in." I understood immediately. Classic pincer movement. Corporate strategy applied to personal warfare. The kind of coordinated attack that left the opposition with no escape routes and no bargaining position. "You want coordinated action," I said. "I want them blindsided. Same day, same time, no room for damage control, or those heartfelt apologies that somehow make the betrayed spouse feel guilty for being upset about the betrayal." Her eyes had the cold focus of someone who'd spent too many years watching her investment portfolio get manipulated by people who thought she wasn't paying attention. Joint confrontation, both couples, neutral location, all evidence on the table simultaneously. The Henderson appointment could wait. Hell, the Henderson group could wait. This was the kind of opportunity that doesn't come along every day. A chance to apply professional-grade problem-solving to a personal crisis with a partner who actually understood strategy. I texted my assistant to reschedule the Henderson meeting, citing urgent client emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. Rachel was about to become a client, and this was definitely an emergency, just not the kind that involved property acquisitions. "What's your timeline?" Originally, I was thinking this Friday, but after some consideration, I realized we need more preparation time. Rachel pulled out a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. 2 weeks from today, Friday night, private dining room at Morrison's downtown. I've already done preliminary reconnaissance. Told Jason it's a networking dinner with potential clients from his corporate training circuit. I had to admire the strategic thinking. Morrison's was where deals got closed, where handshakes happened over expensive steaks and even more expensive wine. Professional territory, neutral ground with enough class to prevent a public scene, but intimate enough that there'd be no escaping the conversation once it started. 2 weeks gives us time to prepare properly, I said, my brain already shifting into project management mode, documentation, legal consultation, financial preparation. Exactly. They'll be expecting business talk about synergistic opportunities and cross-platform collaboration. All that corporate buzzword nonsense that Jason spews when he's trying to impress people. Rachel's smile turned predatory. They'll get business talk. The business of ending marriages and restructuring personal portfolios. Melissa can join us. Make it a double date. The words tasted bitter, but the strategy was sound. She enjoys networking events where she can showcase her communications expertise. Ironic, considering how much she's been communicating lately. Rachel gathered her materials with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years organizing other people's financial disasters. I'll handle the logistics and continued surveillance. You handle getting Melissa there without suspicion and start organizing your personal assets for optimal protection. Documentation strategy, everything. Financial records, property deeds, communication logs, travel expenses, anything you don't want divided by a judge who doesn't know the full story and thinks 50-50 is fair, regardless of who actually earned what. She stood, smoothing her blazer. Also, start thinking about post-dissolution living arrangements. 2 weeks isn't long to find appropriate housing. Already handled. There's a downtown condo I've been watching. Investment property that suddenly looks like a personal residence opportunity. Excellent. Forward thinking. Rachel paused at the table's edge. One more thing, Mr. Brooks. During these 2 weeks, maintain normal routines. Don't let on that anything's changed. The element of surprise is our primary tactical advantage. Understood, though I have to ask, why the elaborate coordination? Why not just confront them separately and let the chips fall where they may? Rachel's expression shifted, and for the first time, I saw something beyond professional calculation. Something personal and sharp and angry. Because Jason will blame me for not being understanding enough, for not recognizing his emotional needs, for being too focused on financial security instead of romantic connection. And your wife will blame you for working too much, for not being present enough, for not appreciating her enough. She picked up her purse. They'll make us the villains in their love story. But if we're there together, with documentation, they can't rewrite the narrative. They can't make this about our failures as spouses. It becomes about their choices as adults. That hit home. In real estate, I'd seen plenty of partnership dissolutions where the guilty party tried to blame market conditions, economic downturns, anything except their own poor decision-making. Having a united front with documented evidence was the difference between a clean separation and a protracted legal battle. Friday, 2 weeks from today, Morrison's at 7 sharp, and Mr. Brooks. She extended her hand for a business handshake. Bring copies of everything, multiple copies. Paper trail beats emotional manipulation every time. She left like she'd arrived, efficiently, purposefully, with the kind of confidence that comes from having all the numbers on your side and knowing exactly how to use them. I sat there for another 20 minutes, finishing coffee that had gone cold, thinking about the Henderson deal and how sometimes the most important acquisitions aren't buildings. Sometimes they're partnerships, sometimes they're revenge, sometimes they're both. That afternoon, I called Melissa from the office, keeping my voice in that casual register you use when discussing dinner plans instead of discussing the systematic documentation of adultery. Hey, beautiful, you free 2 weeks from Friday? I think so. Why? Her voice had that distracted quality she'd been carrying lately, the sound of someone juggling multiple conversations, multiple commitments, multiple versions of the truth. Now I knew why. Business dinner, Morrison's downtown, new client opportunity, corporate training consultant looking to expand into real estate seminars. Thought you might enjoy the networking angle. Maybe discuss cross-promotional opportunities for your communications firm. Perfect cover story. Melissa always enjoyed client dinners where she could showcase her strategic communications expertise, especially when it involved potential collaboration with other professional services. The irony that she'd been conducting her own collaboration with a corporate training consultant wasn't lost on me. Morrison's? That's fancy for a first meeting. Guy's got serious money behind him, leadership development for Fortune 500 companies, executive retreat planning, the kind of client who books private dining rooms for Tuesday lunch meetings. I kept the details vague but impressive. 2-week notice gives you time to prepare your portfolio, maybe put together some promotional materials. Absolutely. I'll wear the navy dress, keep it professional but approachable. Not the red one, I thought. That stays in the closet with the rest of the carefully curated lies. The next 2 weeks became an exercise in operational security that would have made military strategists proud. Rachel and I met twice more, once at a different cafe across town, once at the downtown public library where she showed me additional surveillance evidence that painted an increasingly detailed picture of Jason and Melissa's professional development sessions. Turns out they had a routine. Tuesday lunch meetings at Romano's, Thursday evening strategy sessions at the Marriott, Sunday afternoon creative brainstorming at the fitness center, where Jason maintained a corporate membership. Very thorough approach to collaboration. Very comprehensive coverage of all the major food groups in adultery logistics. They're treating this like a business partnership. Rachel observed, sliding hotel receipts across the library table. Scheduled meetings, consistent venues, expense tracking. Jason's even claiming some of this as business entertainment on his tax filings. Professional courtesy, I said. When you're conducting an affair with someone in corporate communications, you probably want to maintain proper documentation standards. Rachel's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Nothing says true love like itemized deductions. During those 2 weeks, I followed Rachel's advice about maintaining normal routines while quietly organizing my financial position for optimal protection. The Henderson deal closed with a 15% profit margin, which I immediately moved into a separate account at a different bank. I reviewed property deeds, updated insurance beneficiaries, and consulted with my attorney about asset protection strategies, all under the guise of standard business planning. Melissa never questioned any of it. Why would she? I'd been handling our financial planning for 20 years, and she'd always been content to focus on her career while trusting me to manage the numbers. Another bit of irony, considering how much she was trusting Jason to manage other aspects of her life. I also started apartment hunting. Not obviously, just casual browsing of downtown listings, the kind of market research any commercial real estate professional might conduct to understand residential trends. I found a corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the financial district. Perfect for someone starting over. Someone who needed to remember what it felt like to wake up in a space that hadn't been contaminated by lies. The most interesting part of those 2 weeks was watching Melissa operate with what she thought was complete information security. She'd always been good at her job, but apparently she was even better at compartmentalization. She managed our household conversations, our social calendar, our evening routines with the same professional competence she brought to managing corporate communications campaigns. She cooked dinner Tuesday nights while texting someone about Thursday's presentation review. She planned our weekend errands while scheduling Sunday morning client calls. She kissed me goodbye Thursday mornings while mentally preparing for afternoon strategy sessions with the leadership consultant. It was like living with someone who was running 2 separate businesses from the same office, keeping the client lists completely segregated, never letting the operational details cross-contaminate. Professional-grade deception, the kind that requires genuine skill to maintain without making obvious mistakes. I found myself almost impressed by the operational sophistication. Almost. Rachel's surveillance during this period became increasingly detailed. She'd invested in professional-grade equipment. Long-range cameras, audio recording devices, GPS tracking for Jason's vehicle. The kind of comprehensive intelligence gathering that Fortune 500 companies use for competitive analysis, except applied to marriage termination instead of market penetration. I'm documenting everything, she told me during our second library meeting. Frequency, duration, expense allocation, geographic patterns. When we present this evidence, I want it to be the kind of comprehensive report that ends all discussion about misunderstandings or emotional confusion. You're building a prosecution case. I'm building an ironclad business case for dissolution. These aren't emotional decisions based on hurt feelings. These are strategic decisions based on verifiable data about partnership violations and resource misallocation. By the end of week 2, we had assembled what could only be described as the most thoroughly documented adultery case in the history of suburban professional marriages. Rachel's evidence portfolio was thicker than most commercial real estate acquisition files, with better supporting documentation than most Fortune 500 merger proposals. Friday night approached with the inevitability of a hostile takeover, and about as much emotional warmth. Friday arrived with the kind of October clarity that makes downtown look sharp against the sky, like someone had adjusted the contrast settings on the entire city. I spent the morning reviewing contracts and the afternoon organizing documents Rachel had suggested: marriage certificate, property records, bank statements, insurance policies. The paper architecture of a life I thought I knew, now being reorganized for strategic dismantling. At 6:30, Melissa emerged from our bedroom, wearing the navy dress and her confident smile, the same expression she probably wore when presenting quarterly communication strategies to corporate boards. She looked beautiful, professional, completely unaware she was walking into the most important presentation of her life, one where she'd be the subject instead of the presenter. Ready to charm some corporate trainers? She asked, adjusting her earrings with the same precision she brought to crafting press releases. Always ready, I said, and meant it differently than she heard it. The drive downtown gave me time to appreciate the irony. 20 years of marriage, and we were finally going to have the most honest conversation of our relationship. Too bad it was going to be our last. Morrison's private dining room overlooked the city's financial district through floor-to-ceiling windows. That probably cost more than most people's cars. Mahogany table, leather chairs, the kind of space where million-dollar handshakes happened over brandy and cigars. Rachel had chosen well. This was the type of venue where people conducted themselves with restraint, even when delivering devastating news. She was already seated when we arrived, across from a man who had to be Jason. Tall, athletic build, the kind of easy confidence that probably served him well in corporate training seminars about leadership presence and executive communication. He stood when we entered, extending his hand with a practiced smile that had probably closed countless consulting contracts. Austin Brooks, right? Jason Hart. Rachel's told me great things about your work in commercial real estate. His grip was firm, his eye contact direct, his whole demeanor radiating that professional warmth that consultants use to make clients feel like they're the most important people in the room. Under different circumstances, I might have liked him. Under these circumstances, I was calculating how many seconds it would take to break his nose, and whether the mahogany table would provide adequate leverage. Likewise, I said, this is my wife, Melissa. The moment of recognition flickered across both their faces. Surprise, calculation, fear, then rapid professional mask deployment. Jason recovered faster, but Melissa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, like someone who just realized the quarterly projections were about to miss targets by a significant margin. Both of them were thinking the same thing. Coincidence or trap? Small world, Melissa said, her communications training keeping her voice steady even as I watched her mental gears spinning at maximum RPM. Jason and I know each other from the corporate circuit. Indeed, Rachel said smoothly, her tone carrying the same measured authority she probably used when explaining to clients why their portfolios had just lost significant value. That's actually why I suggested we all meet. We ordered drinks, wine for the ladies, whiskey for the men, the kind of alcohol selection that happens automatically in these situations. Made small talk about real estate markets and communication strategies while appetizers arrived. Surface-level, professional conversation that felt like verbal shadowboxing, everyone waiting to see who would throw the first real punch. Jason tried to steer conversation toward potential business synergies between real estate development and corporate training programs. Melissa chimed in with insights about integrated communication strategies for multi-platform professional services. Rachel and I played along, nodding at appropriate moments, contributing just enough to maintain the illusion of legitimate business discussion. It was almost artistic, watching them work together to construct a plausible narrative for why they'd want to involve both spouses in their professional relationship. True collaborative effort, really. The kind of seamless partnership that probably made their affair feel like a natural extension of their working relationship. Rachel waited until after the main courses arrived, perfectly timed, like someone who understood that people are less likely to cause scenes when there's expensive food on the table that they haven't finished eating. I have something to share with the table, she said, producing the same manila envelope she'd shown me 2 weeks earlier, plus several additional folders that suggested her investigation had continued expanding during our preparation period. Professional documentation that I think everyone should review. She distributed copies like she was presenting quarterly reports to a board of directors, methodical, comprehensive, with the kind of attention to detail that left no room for misinterpretation. Photos, emails, receipts, hotel records, GPS tracking data, communication logs. Evidence laid out with the same methodical precision she probably used for investment portfolios, except this portfolio was documenting the systematic liquidation of 2 marriages. The silence stretched for exactly 15 seconds. I counted. Jason moved first, trying to activate his professional damage control training. Rachel, what is this supposed to? It's supposed to be comprehensive documentation of your extracurricular activities, she said, her voice maintaining the same level tone she'd probably used when explaining market volatility to nervous investors. Date-stamped, location-verified, financially cross-referenced, with supporting evidence from multiple independent sources. Melissa's face had gone pale, her communications expertise apparently not including crisis management for personal disasters. She stared at the evidence like it was written in a foreign language, or like someone had just handed her a press release announcing her own professional termination. "This is," she started, then stopped, probably realizing that her usual arsenal of corporate communication strategies wasn't going to be particularly effective in this situation. "Comprehensive," I finished for her. "Thorough, professional-grade documentation. The kind of evidence-based analysis that supports major strategic decisions." Jason tried his charm offensive next, deploying the same leadership consultant techniques he probably used when the corporate training seminars went sideways. "Look, I think there's been some misunderstanding here. Rachel, honey, we should discuss this privately. The time for private discussions ended when you made our marriage a public relations problem." Rachel cut him off with the precision of someone terminating an underperforming investment. "Mr. Brooks and I have compared notes. Your travel schedule doesn't match your expense reports. Your leadership seminars seem to focus heavily on one particular student, with remarkably consistent scheduling patterns." Melissa found her voice, though it carried none of her usual professional confidence. "Austin, this is insane. Can you explain Thursday afternoon strategy sessions at the Marriott?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational, like we were discussing quarterly performance reviews. "Can you explain the Romano's lunch meetings that don't appear on any corporate calendar? Can you explain why your professional development requires so much after-hours consultation?" She looked at Jason. He looked at his hands. Neither of them looked at their spouses, which told me everything about their partnership dynamics and absolutely nothing I wanted to know about their leadership skills. "The explanation," Rachel continued, pulling out 2 additional sets of documents with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years managing complex financial portfolios, "is simple. You've been conducting an affair with the operational security of a business partnership, which, in a way, it was. You both had something to gain and something to risk." She placed the new documents in front of each of them, like she was distributing annual performance evaluations. "These are dissolution papers, filed with family court this afternoon, along with comprehensive supporting evidence. All that remains is signature acknowledgement and execution of asset division." The room went dead quiet. Outside, downtown traffic hummed through the expensive windows. Inside, I could hear Jason's breathing change rhythm, hear Melissa's engagement ring clicking against her water glass as her hands started trembling. "Today?" Melissa whispered, her voice carrying the same disbelief as someone who just learned their entire department was being eliminated. "This afternoon," I confirmed. "While you were conducting your final strategy session with Jason, Rachel and I were executing strategy of our own. Turns out, we make an effective team when it comes to project coordination." Jason tried once more, activating every leadership development technique in his professional arsenal. "Austin, man, we can work this out. Business professionals, right? We can find a solution that works for everyone, some kind of collaborative approach." "The collaborative approach," I said, "ended when you decided to collaborate with my wife without including me in the partnership agreement. The solution that works for everyone is accountability. You made choices. Now you implement the consequences." Rachel stood up with the same composed efficiency she'd demonstrated throughout our entire 2-week operation. "Gentlemen, ladies, this concludes our business dinner. Jason, your belongings are packed and relocated to corporate housing downtown. Seemed appropriate, given your professional priorities. Mr. Brooks, I assume you've made similar arrangements?" I nodded. "Guest room's been converted to an office, as planned. Melissa's items are organized and ready for pickup at her convenience." Melissa stared at me like I'd become a complete stranger, which was ironic considering how well I'd apparently known the stranger she'd become. "You planned this, both of you. This whole thing was a setup." "This whole thing," Rachel said, "was a response to your setup. You two established the operational parameters. We simply provided appropriate project management." Jason pushed back from the table, his leadership consultant composure finally cracking under pressure. "This is vindictive. You're both being vindictive." "We're both being thorough," I corrected. "There's a significant difference. Vindictive would be public exposure, social media campaigns, professional reputation destruction. Thorough is private resolution with comprehensive documentation and clean asset division. They left together, which seemed appropriate given their collaborative working relationship. Not holding hands this time, too much awareness of the audience and the circumstances, but together nonetheless, united in their shared surprise at discovering that actions have consequences even when you think you've managed the operational security properly. Rachel and I stayed to finish our drinks and settle the check like civilized business professionals. Efficient execution, I said. Clean resolution, she agreed. No shouting, no public scenes, no protracted negotiations. Just evidence, action, and professional follow-through. What's your next project? Property division, investment reallocation, getting back to managing my own portfolio instead of auditing someone else's deceptive financial practices. She raised her glass in a toast that felt more like a business celebration than a personal victory. You? Henderson Group wants to discuss additional acquisitions. Work continues, portfolio expands, life moves forward without operational complications. We didn't toast to new beginnings or second chances or any of that emotional nonsense. We toasted to professional competency applied to personal problems, to strategic thinking over emotional reaction, to the deep satisfaction of a complex project executed flawlessly under challenging circumstances. 6 months later, my life had achieved the kind of efficiency that comes from eliminating unnecessary operational complications. The Henderson deal had generated 3 additional acquisitions. My portfolio expanded to $28 million annually. I bought the downtown condo I'd researched, corner unit, floor-to-ceiling windows, view of the financial district, where successful people made successful decisions without worrying about managing other people's emotional instability. Rachel and I occasionally met for coffee, sometimes transitioning into dinner, eventually developing the kind of partnership that comes from mutual professional respect and shared appreciation for competent project management. We were both too experienced in risk assessment to rush into anything without proper due diligence, but the preliminary analysis looked promising for long-term collaboration. Melissa disappeared into whatever communications consulting work exists for people whose professional reputation includes systematic deception of business partners. Jason's leadership development career apparently didn't survive the leadership crisis, but that's what happens when your professional expertise doesn't extend to personal decision-making. Sometimes the most satisfying victories are the quiet ones, where competence beats charm and preparation defeats manipulation.